as part of the iPens Day at the Worldhappiness Festival. And welcome everybody. And let's just begin with that moment of pause. So just closing your eyes for a second, getting the back and the body comfortable, and just eyes closed, inhaling lovely fresh air, and then a deep exhale, and be alive, be here now. And I'm going to be talking about two topics. Why did it take COVID to wake school systems, education systems up globally to the importance of well-being? And then how are we going to come out of COVID better than we went into it? How can we give the children, the students, a better experience so that they really build their bodies, their emotions, their minds, their souls in a sustainable way for a future that is unknowable, but we know that the better prepared we can help make our young people, and indeed our staff and our teachers and school leaders, the better it's all going to be. So now, just a warning here, I've got some very technically sophisticated, advanced graphics coming. If it's all a little bit too intense for you, well, look, I'm sorry, but just stick with it. I mean, they are cutting edge, high level technology slides. And you just had a glimpse of it. First question, why did it take COVID to change education? And the first sophisticated slide there is, what are they? Just have a look, just immerse your mind in that image there. And yes, cabbages. So what have cabbages got to teach us? And cabbages are fantastic teachers, perhaps the best teachers you ever had without realizing it. So cabbages teach us that people weren't listening. Cabbages, people just, it was obvious that we needed to be bedding in, baking in, hunkering in, well-being at the very heart of all our education institutions, but we were not doing it. Why not? Because we had cabbage ears. And COVID has helped blow that away. Secondly, Swedes. Now, what might Swedes suggest to us about why we didn't listen before and why it took COVID? And Swedes, well, what happens if you get out a fork and you mash Swedes is they become really incredibly stodgy. And stodginess explains why the world over, our school systems, every January, every September, we just carried on doing the same thing because we're just a bit stodgy and there was never the right moment to make a change. And yeah, think about Swedes. I mean, the next time you have a conversation with a Swede, just think about what it's saying about stodginess, about not being stodgy specifically. And then what else? Well, what have we got coming up next? Yeah, look at that. Onions. And onions suggests to me that another reason why we didn't make the changes that we needed to be making, and there are across the world millions of young people whose lives have been diminished and depleted, in many cases tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands perhaps, people at school or people after they left school, their education institutions have taken their lives. And we could have acted in a way that would have reduced at least some of those by giving them a more intelligent understanding of the way that their minds, emotions operate and how to handle those really difficult emotions that we have. And who knows, some listening today might well have had those thoughts themselves in your own lives. I certainly have. It's quite normal to have those thoughts, but we haven't acted on them. And why has the education system not moved outwards so that we've had a much more holistic sense of helping young people develop as human beings, not just developing their 2-3 inches of their brain, but their whole person? I mean, I'm enormous as a person, 6'11", as anybody who knows me knows, but whatever size you are, we're all of us, we're our bodies, we're our emotions, our minds, our souls, and schools need to be developing. And why not? What are onions telling us? Because fear, and fear of onions are incredibly fearful. They inspire fear in many people. I mean, there you are, you know, you're sitting down, lovely sunny day, and you're enjoying maybe an alfresco meal, and suddenly you come across a really grainy bit of onion, and that just gets fear inside you. So fear, being serious now, fear is in every school system. Fear drives school systems. Fear of failure, children failing, teachers failing, heads failing, boards and governors failing, school systems failing. And yet what we're talking about here with well-being is proven that it works. It develops young people to be able to manage themselves in school and after school. And by the way, it also helps their results. And then next on, why did it take COVID? And it took COVID because of something so enormous. And pumpkins can be absolutely enormous. It took something as enormous as COVID to really shake people up, horrifyingly large in its national, local, regional, and international impact. And we are far from through it, very, very far from through it yet. And maybe we're just going to have to learn to live with COVID and the variants, and maybe future epidemics, and something that big was needed to break us through our complacency, our not listening, our fear of change, and our stodginess. And finally, I think, yeah, now what are those? Are they truly global, these vegetables? And these are Brussels sprouts. And I don't know what the associations that you may have, a little bit indelicate, this in a mixed audience, but Brussels sprouts are known to produce hot air. And to be honest, we've had so much hot air in school systems, so much about having to crank up kids and schools even more with their math and their science and their language skills, without recognizing that doing it in this fear-based, driven, mean, narrow way, competitive way, kid against kid, teacher against teacher, school against school, is so undignified, so against the grain of human nature. And we lacked the big people. I mean, the people with power to make changes, education ministers, often only when they leave office do they recognize that they have failed to address the issues. It's not just about the quantitative measurements of school performance. It's not even just about what you can measure. It's a far bigger enterprise that schools are involved in. So there's just so much hot air around. So those, I think, are the reasons why it's taken COVID to wake us up, to shake us up. And now we're going to go into answering the second question, which are, what are the right lessons for us to learn? How can we ensure that as we go forward, we're going to have an education system that our schools, which are truly better because of the harrowing suffering of COVID, which have ravaged countries and done so much damage to learning, so much damage to mental health, and so much damage to families and carers and the fabric of society. And here again, I'm going to have some very sophisticated, difficult, technically difficult slides for you to get your heads around, and hope that you're not feeling too intimidated by that slide. How are we going to learn the right lessons? And the first is really that Peaches, and it's about timing. It's about timing, and the time is now. Peaches are immensely juicy. Positive education, well-being interventions are incredibly succulent and wonderfully juicy and life-enhancing. But they take a time. You've got to get the right time, and the time is now. The time is now. A hard peach will not give you that beautiful, juicy taste. So get the timing right. The time is now. Don't leave it too long. Don't leave. We've got to get the kids back to where they would have been at maths and language, and be driven by that, and gun the kids, after an initially nice bit of getting them back into schools. If you've had lockdowns, that bit of catch up, making it just painful again, and narrow and mean and limited in terms of the vision of what education is. Don't leave it too late. This is the moment now to start working. And now we're on to lemons. And if the POSED, positive education, wellbeing interventions, are not incredibly tangy, zesty, if they're not incredibly alive, they won't work. I mean, honestly, some well-being, some POSED is unbelievably boring. And that's just, well, nothing's unforgivable, but it's pretty close to being unforgivable to make well-being dull. It needs to be incredibly alert, alive, full of zest, full of tanginess and sharpness, and then, hey, you get all the kids right behind it. And next is that it has to be there. It has to be specific for the school that you're in, the age, the type of children. I mean, there are many different types of melon, and looking at those, you could say, well, watermelon, is it really the same family of melon as a cantaloupe, for example? And this is the point. It needs to be bespoke, your POSED, to your school, to the locality, to the traditions, culture of the school, to the expectations of the children. There's a basic core, a universal core of what well-being is about, which is about the discovery of that inner harmony, the ability to be at one with oneself, and the more that we can get that in early on with children, the more they embed it in terms of their own self. They won't need to go out and take illegal drugs or or dependency in any way. They'll just have that lovely harmonic centeredness. But you know, that's the core of it all. But there are many different ways, many different forms, like melons have many different forms. And then what else do we need to ensure? Well, strawberries. And strawberries there are, for me, symbolic of the fact that they need to be strawberries really integrated throughout that school system. So imagine a big juicy, you're putting in the strawberries into your blender, into your mixer, and they're spinning around, and you're making that lovely strawberry juice. And it needs to, that strawberry juice flow through every single aspect of the educational institution, from the board, the local government, through the governors, trustees, heads, principals, senior leaders, all the way down, and including the parents. It needs to be a truly integrated experience for well-being to work. It is not something that you do on a 3 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon as the school week is coming to an end, and think that you can just compartmentalize it in that way. It needs to be a lived experience. And if the facilitator, tutor, teacher is offering well-being, or the head, and they're shouting and they're irritable and they're tense and clenched, it just doesn't work. It needs to be integral. And then the final one in the dying minutes here is, there you are. It is a banana, obviously, and we have to finish with the banana. And, you know, it is there in the mouth, coming out into the bottom, from the head to the bottom. It needs to be top down and bottom up. It needs to be, for well-being truly to work, for it to get it right this time, it needs to be recognized that this is the demand coming from the children upwards and from the top down, that it is about, yeah, you know, this will improve results. It will improve their educational opportunities. It will improve their employability, but it will also make them far better, truer people. It won't just do this bit up here. It will do the whole holistic thing, that the advantages, academic, the advantages, emotional, creative, the advantages environmentally with the environment, again, utterly integrated. And perhaps we should have done more to have integrated the environment more closely into the whole of well-being before we went into COVID. And as we come out, we have to ensure that from the top down to the bottom, well-being and the whole sense of a commitment to well-being is there, is present, and that it has environmental concerns with our schools, far greener places, harvesting some of their own energy, having animals as and when that can be possible. I mean, just a dog can so transform a school, as those of you who have dogs in your schools will know. Growing some plants, having children putting their hands into the soil and seeing the extraordinary rhythm of nature. So there we are, a few thoughts on the banana, the strawberry, the melon, the lemon, and the peach as the technically sophisticated ways of reminding us how we have to ensure, in the name of our children, why POSED needs to be at the very heart of well-being and of our schools as we go forward. And just to finish with it, just eyes closed, inhale and exhale, and farewell.
Was raised in the 80s, bricks in the place. These days were a madness, nights were just crazy. Looking back, grateful for the man that it made me. All about the future, but I reminisce daily.
See the people live with them trouble, y'all. Planting, I don't see the people live with them trouble, y'all. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hola, soy Luisgallardo, el fundador de Worldhappiness Fest, y quiero invitarte a la Semana Mundial de la Felicidad, del 18 al 23 de marzo. Va a ser impresionante. 150 expertos de más de 45 países, anfitriones de Agora, compartiendo qué va a ser el futuro de la felicidad. Porque como sabes, desde el Fest y desde World Happiness Foundation lo que queremos es crear un mundo con más libertad, con más conciencia y más felicidad. Y para eso te necesitamos. Hemos preparado una semana impresionante. Empezamos el 18 focalizándonos en felicidad en el trabajo. Pasamos a salud mental y física. Continuamos el día 20, que es el Día Internacional de la Felicidad, con educación. Continuamos con el planeta y el impacto social que cada uno de nosotros puede tener a pequeña escala o a gran escala. Y seguimos con las tecnologías de la transformación, esas tecnologías que nos están ayudando hoy a conectarnos y a poder conseguir cosas que antes eran impensables. Y terminamos el día 23 con felicidad gestionada desde las políticas públicas y el gobierno. Así que, como ves, una semana completa, llena de actividades en la que vamos realmente a crear el futuro de la felicidad. Pero para eso te necesitamos. Así que únete, worldhappiness.foundation, y te esperamos del 18 al 23 de marzo.